Could you please tell us, I mean, whether the process of input, process, and then output, can we take in a string or just to give emphasis on input only, which is comprehensible, as you said?
Well, it
Thank
depends. If you're doing serious psycholinguistics, which I'm not interested in, you have to worry about what goes on in the mind as you do that, et cetera. For us, working in language, all we have to know is what is optimal input. That's really all you have to know. And that's what our students have to know. That's what our potential teachers have to know, and language acquisition, people who are acquiring language. We don't have to go too deeply into the neurology of the brain, the psychology of the brain. The big breakthrough, compelling, comprehensible input, a lot of it, and it needs to be rich. This is really the depth of my understanding. In the old days, I did a lot of neurolinguistics, brain studies, et cetera, but we don't really need that anymore. I think we've made the fundamental breakthrough, and we should work with that. By the way, you mentioned Chomsky, Lenneberg. I have to put in one thought. I did have a conversation with Professor Chomsky a couple of months ago. It's on YouTube. My colleague, Dushan Ashtari, recorded and arranged it. It was very good. I got to tell you, that was one of the great, as you can imagine, professional thrills of my life, talking to the master, Chomsky, and I was able to thank him for all the work he's done. We had an interesting conversation about Erich Lenneberg. My dissertation basically showed that Lenneberg was wrong about the neurological basis of the critical period. But the conversation with Professor Chomsky, what we agreed is, there's nothing wrong with being wrong. And that Lenneberg gave us a huge contribution. We both admire Lenneberg. His hypothesis was not correct, that there's a neurological basis for the critical period. But the question was right. And it stimulated the correct and right research. It pushed us forward enormously. And when I got my result that Lenneberg's analysis was incorrect, I sent it to him. He responded immediately and he said, "You're right, I agree with you." So this is the kind of people that we have in our profession. There's nothing wrong with being wrong, and what we want is progress. And that should encourage us to make bold hypotheses and be happy if they're wrong, because that means we're progressing. So, and Chomsky, oh my God, what a guy.
Okay, thank you. I would like to invite, thank you, Professor Avasthi, for your question. Professor Aviswedi, our first speaker today, I think he has a question. Is he around?
Yes, sir, he is there.
Yes, sir, he's there.
It's great to listen to you, Professor Krashen.
Thank you.
I am a creative writer, but a teacher of English for so many years, nearly half a century. But the overriding question all the time in English, every meeting of the English teachers and the time of making syllabuses is that there should be a kind of clear division between literature component and the language component. Some people were asking me the same question with me also. As a creative writer, I'm always stressing that read more stories, introduce more literature, and then that will kind of keep you reading and motivated. This division between language-oriented and literature-oriented has become a kind of block in our.
Okay, let's relieve the block right now. I'm so glad you asked this. This is the perfect question because it's only obvious to me in the last 10 years when I've begun to appreciate the value of literature, especially so-called popular literature, which we academics are supposed to disdain, popular books, bestsellers. I've been reading a lot of them, and driving in Los Angeles, I listen to them all the time. They're good. And language teaching is literature. That's what it is. It's fiction is the answer to everything. Let me tell you about fiction, what the research has said in the last several decades. Number one, fiction is how we develop vocabulary, grammar, writing style. The studies that show that the quantity of reading relates to writing, people are reading fiction. There's more. Research from the University of Michigan Stanovich and his colleagues. This is first language, but I think it applies to second language as well. People who read more know more. They know more about everything, and it's from reading fiction. They know more about literature. They know more about history. They know more about science. They know more about practical things. There's also research showing that people who read fiction have superior habits of mind. There was an article in The Guardian a few months ago when Barack Obama was interviewed, and he was asked about fiction, and it is as if he had read this research, but he hadn't. He said, fiction shows me, first of all, that people, you can get to know people who seem to be different from you. Because, you know, as you read fiction, you are the character, you meet them, you go through the same adventures, you begin to understand them. And he says, when you read fiction, what he has learned is simple solutions don't work. We get that from stories. Now, let me summarize this by telling you about a letter to the editor I got published 2 years ago in the Washington Post. It was very satisfying. I was amazed they published it. A lot of people had written letters complaining, you guys are criticizing President Donald Trump too much. I think Trump's staff wrote them. You criticize him for all his spelling mistakes that he makes on his tweets. It's only spelling. Why are you worried about spelling? He just needs a secretary, okay? My letter was this. What our research shows is that spelling is quite important in that people who read more spell better. They're very closely connected. If you read a lot, you don't become a perfect speller, but you're better than someone who doesn't read very much. Not only that, reading gives you language, gives you a bigger vocabulary, gives you grammatical structure, writing style, all these things come from reading. And I talked about how it gives you knowledge of the world and how it gives you these better attitudes. And I said it right in the letter. Donald Trump is not a reader. We all know this. He's bragged about it. As a result, he has spelling problems, grammar problems, all kinds of problems. He doesn't know anything. He has illustrated this over and over again, how little he knows about politics, geography, history, and science, etc. His lack, and the fact that he looks for simple solutions to everything. That his failure to read has hurt all of us. That was my letter. It's on my website. I'll be happy to send a copy around, etc. And they actually published it. It felt very good. It's a good time to publicize this. By the way, I am fulfilling my patriotic duty as an American citizen by criticizing the American president. A previous president, Theodore Roosevelt, who was a reader, by the way, a true voracious reader, Roosevelt said, it is the obligation of the citizen to criticize the president when the president needs the criticism. If you don't criticize the president, that is treason. That is a serious crime because it is our obligation to the common good to tell other people about this. So I've just now fulfilled my obligation, and I say this everywhere about Donald Trump. I apologize for Donald Trump wherever I go because he's been responsible for a huge amount of suffering in the world. So yes, fiction, absolutely yes. Language teaching should be based to a large extent on fiction. I think that's absolutely correct. I haven't always said this because it took me a while. I'm a slow learner, but I've now arrived at that conclusion. Thanks for asking.